Holy. So we have all our journalists in. I will ask you all to please mute your microphones if you're not already muted. And I will turn the virtual podium over to Chief Sidney Peters, co-chair for the Assembly.
Hey, thank you, Crystal. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Chief Sidney Peters, and I am the co-chair of the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaw Chiefs. Today's session, we have Chief Gerald Toney, our Fisheries Lead, who will be speaking on behalf of the Assembly. We also have our legal counsel, Mr. Bruce Wildsmith, will also be on the line to help answer any legal or technical questions that the media may have. As per the instructions in which you all have been provided, if you would like to ask questions at the end of our remarks, please notify Crystal Dory. She is our communication manager, as she will be monitoring the question period.
So
Also,
how do I ask questions here?
Well, you should be able to. So what we'll do, just wanted, once I finish the opening remarks, I'll answer that. Also, just so you know, today is going to be a recorded session, and it will be provided to all the registered journalists this afternoon. So what I was going to do, and I think there was CBC was asking the question, Crystal, how is the best way you would want them to come forward to you to ask the question? Just with the hand up?
I actually have already received a list of names from journalists of those who have questions via email. They can email me, or I believe that there is a chat function here in Zoom, and you can send me a message to have your name added to the list. And then after the statements are made by Chief Toney and Bruce Wildsmith, we will open the floor to questions, and I will go through the list and announce each journalist to ask their one question and then their follow-up question.
Okay, is there any other questions? If there is none, again, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming today. So now I'm going to invite Chief Toney to provide some remarks on behalf of the Assembly. So Chief Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chief Sid. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chief Gerald Toney, and I am Fisheries Lead for Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaw Chiefs. As everybody knows, fisheries has been a part of the Mi'kmaw way of life since time immemorial. Our right to earn a moderate livelihood has been affirmed by the highest court in the country. Yesterday, Minister Jordan once again made clear that she sees the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada having full control over rights-based fisheries. This is unacceptable. DFO continues to dictate and impose their rule on fisheries that is outside of their scope and mandate. The right to a livelihood fisheries is not and should not be driven by industry or the federal government. It must come from the Mi'kmaw Nova Scotia. Imposing restrictions independently without input from our people on how we implement our right must stop. We know that DFO has concerns for sustainable fisheries, and we do too. We have been asking DFO for an opportunity to discuss co-management, as many of our communities have been working to develop livelihood fisheries plans based on our Mi'kmaw principles of Nadugalan, which is taking only what you need and being respectful to the land, animals, and environment. DFO must consult with the Mi'kmaw, and as it says in the Marshall decision, justify decisions that they have been making behind closed doors. We want to see data that they have on fish, and we want to have a discussion with them, especially on seasons. Our science tells us that fishing outside of DFO commercial seasons will not be an issue to the health of the species. And moreover, it ensures the safety of our harvesters, who are using much smaller vessels than during a commercial harvest. DFO continued to fail in their duty to consult with the Mi'kmaw. Canada needs to act in good faith and meet with us now. Thank you.
Chief Sid, I believe you're muted.
Sorry, everybody. I just wanted to thank Chief Jerry for providing those opening comments. As I mentioned, we have Bruce Wildsmith on the phone as well. So what I'll do is I'll pass over, and if there's any additional comments or remarks before we go into the media questions, I'll pass it over to Bruce. Bruce.
Thank you, Chief Sid. The only point that I wanted to make and to emphasize is the lack of consultation about the minister's decision to restrict the Mi'kmaw livelihood fishery to the commercial seasons. In the minister's statement that she issued yesterday, she quoted from the Marshall decision concerning her regulatory power, subject to being able to justify those limitations. What she did not do in that quote is reference the justification process that had been set out in the Marshall case based on a previous case called Badger. The Badger case told the government how they would go about justifying any limitation on the exercise of a Mi'kmaw right. And they did not reference Badger, and they did not reference the criteria in Badger. And of course, the first and foremost one that we would want to mention is the lack of consultation. There are two processes going on with the federal government. One is a negotiation process under a framework agreement signed in 2007. And that framework agreement means that everything that happens in that is without prejudice and off the record and is just between the parties. But we also have a consultation terms of reference, which sets out parameters for how the federal government should consult when they're dealing with the Mi'kmaw in Nova Scotia. That's a consultation terms of reference that includes Nova Scotia, the province, the Mi'kmaw, as well as Canada. That's a process that they could have followed. Right now, a first session on consultation over the 2021 proposed fishing has taken place, but the issue of commercial seasons and seasonality was never brought up and justified in that process. So I'll stop at that point.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. So what I'll do, I'll ask Crystal to please, I guess, begin the questions and the answer portion. Go ahead, Crystal.
Thank you, Chief Peters. So as Chief Peters just mentioned, we'll now go into the Q&A session. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have a list of journalists who do have questions, and I will be calling on each individually. You will have time for one question plus a follow-up question before we move to the next person. If you like to ask a question, you're concerned that you're not on our list, you can send me an email, or I believe there's a chat function in here that you can send me a message, or you can just simply raise your hand and I will add you to the list. And if you've already sent me an email, no worries, you're already on the list. So first up, we have Steve McKinley from the Toronto Star. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, Crystal. Hi, everyone. Just to go back to this, you said there's been a first issue of a first session of consultation. Can you tell us when that took place and what was discussed at that particular session?
Yes, that session took place this week on Tuesday, on March the 2nd. We wanted to talk about seasonality in that session. However, the federal government wanted to put that off and talk about other kinds of regulatory issues. I should say, as a point of emphasis, that those consultations are on the record and they are not private or confidential, so that we're free to talk about what happened or what did not happen. One of the things that did come out of that session is to re-emphasize previous requests that had been made to DFO to provide their science and their evidence to justify the commercial seasons as being the only way in which the Mi'kmaw could enter the fishery. And so we're still waiting today for any information, any science, any evidence that they have to justify those seasons. And there's supposed to be a session tomorrow on Friday, March the 5th, to talk about that issue.
And going forward, do you have a series of these sessions, or just you're planning one at a time?
I'm sorry, the barking of the dog there just obscured your question a little bit. Could you repeat it, please?
Are there a series of these sessions going forward, or are they being planned one at a time?
Well, two were planned, or the dates were set out, and then the agendas were set. So there would be more. The idea is that each First Nation in Nova Scotia will have a Dumalink livelihood fishery plan of what they propose to do in 2021, and the consultations are intended by the Mi'kmaw to look at those plans and see what the federal government may disagree with, and have them justify why it is that the Mi'kmaw can't do what they wish to do. Now, the minister.
Go ahead.
Minister Jordan's press statement yesterday did reference those plans, and this is something that the Mi'kmaw had evolved themselves, and which was in place for last year for the two fisheries that became somewhat controversial. And so this initiative is something that the federal government has turned around and agreed that this is the way that the Mi'kmaw could go about planning their fishery. However, having said that, so far what's happened is all of the regulatory regime that the federal government has for the commercial fishery, so far they seem to think that that should all apply to the Mi'kmaw fishery, even though the fisheries plans look at it from a Mi'kmaw perspective in a different way.
Okay. Sorry, the same question. Just could you tell us who was at that first session on March 2nd?
Well, the Mi'kmaw, through the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaw Chiefs, have a secretariat called the Mi'kmaw Negotiation Office, shortened to KMKNO. And there is a director of consultations for the Mi'kmaw through KMKNO. And so she and fisheries coordinator on the Mi'kmaw side conducted that session along with the executive director of KMKNO. And on the DFO side, there were some representatives. I'll just mention three. A lady from Ottawa named Jennifer Bowie, a lady from the regional office named Jacinta Berthier, and the acting Director General of the Maritimes region, Doug Wenzel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We're now going to go to Paul Legier from French CBC.
Yes, you can hear me, I take it?
You can.
Okay, what I'm wondering here is the consultation issue, not being consulted, and then I learned today that there are sessions where there was consultation. On which elements of these three elements were you consulted during the first session of consultation? The issue of fisheries and oceans being able to issue permits for this type of fishery, no increased efforts, and the seasonality issue. On these, were these three elements, were you consulted on it during the consultation sessions that you were speaking about?
The short answer would be no. I wasn't there, so I don't have firsthand information. But the thrust of it was about plans that the Mi'kmaw have developed to fish. And so the efforts around consultation and access were about other limitations that the federal government might want. For example, references to things like species at risk, conservation zones in the lobster fishing areas, things like net requirements for lobster preservation, the size of carapace, things like escape hatches on lobster traps, gear to prevent entanglement with whales, those kinds of issues that are really not terribly controversial. That's so far all that's been accomplished. But I think the point to be emphasized is the Mi'kmaw, each community is developing a management plan, and the Mi'kmaw say that's the plan that we want to follow. If you think there's something wrong with that plan, you should tell us what it is, why we can't do what it is we propose to do.
So when you say, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say when it comes around to the question of conservation and seasons, then the question is, well, what do you actually know about that? What evidence do you have? What is the science? Justify why those seasons are the only times in which the Mi'kmaw can fish and respect conservation.
So if I understand correctly, when you say the DFO is imposing rules without consultation, you're talking specifically, there has been consultation on some issues, but imposing rules without consultation, that definitely applies to the three issues of issuing permits, no increased efforts, and the seasonality of the sustainable fishing. Is that correct?
At the moment, the only thing that I'm prepared to say definitively is no consultation on the commercial seasons being the only time.
All right. I do have a follow-up question, if I may.
Actually, Paul, that was the two questions. We now have to move along. We actually have a list of journalists here. So the next up is Elizabeth McSheffy from Global News.
Thank you. I just want to ask, at the end of the day, the federal government is still holding the stick here, and it does have power to discipline any First Nations harvesters who are caught in the water in the spring fishing without a DFO license. Can true nation-to-nation negotiation take place while the federal government still has that disciplinary authority?
Well, who are you asking the question of?
I guess whoever feels like to answer.
Bruce, would you like to take that one?
Okay, I'll say this. The constitutional structure is such that DFO has the constitutional authority to protect fish stocks. And so you can't really take that away. On the other hand, the Mi'kmaw have their Section 35 constitutional rights, the treaty rights, as established in the Marshall case, or reaffirmed in the Marshall case. So you have to reconcile those two things. So can you have nation to nation? Well, within the constitutional structure, I think you can, but the way in which it has gone about in this instance to issue the press release and to lay down the law, as it were, you must have our license and you must fish in commercial season. Otherwise, we're going to enforce. That is not nation to nation approach. It does not respect the self-governing powers of the First Nations.
And thank you so much. And so for my follow-up, I was surprised to hear about the session that took place just this week on Tuesday. And then, the plans sort of released Wednesday. Did Nova Scotia First Nations know that the federal government was planning to publicly release a proposal for Livelihood Fisheries this week?
I wouldn't want to use the word proposal, but they had some knowledge that a statement was going to be issued by the minister. There was communication to the media, I believe, and communication to the commercial fishery. And one journalist did contact the KMKNO office for a comment about the proposed minister's statement. Then at the consultation session on Tuesday, it came up that there was going to be such a statement, but not the contents of it. And there was really a question about, well, when is the minister going to say what it is the minister is going to say? When is it going to come out? And there was a reluctance to comment about the minister's statement until it had actually been made.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next questions will come from Paul Withers, CBC.
Hi, can you folks hear me?
We can.
So my question is for Chief Toney. Chief, I'm going to put this as simply as I can. Do the Mi'kmaw accept any federal government oversight over a moderate livelihood fishery? And if so, under what circumstances?
Sorry, I didn't get that question. I was just taking a few notes. Could you please repeat that?
I'd be quite happy to. Do the Mi'kmaw accept any federal government oversight over a moderate livelihood fishery? And if so, under what circumstances?
Well, the Mi'kmaw in Nova Scotia, we have all 13 bands now are developing their fisheries plans. We understand that we're developing these plans in their, some call them moderate livelihood plans, Nadugalan plans. They fall under our overall guiding principles as a collective right. So we care about, oh, sorry, did I lose somebody?
No, you're good, Chief Chair, you can continue.
Okay, so we want to work with the government. We want to work with the federal government. We want to work with the fisheries associations. But when we come up with our plans and we're working towards our own self-determination and self-government, until that is met, while we're finished working on our plans, then until then, and we know what we're doing as a nation, how does that fit into with the decisions of the DFO? So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we want to work alongside DFO, and we understand the protection of the stock for our future generations. So I think it's it's important for everybody to work together on this. But
so, Chief,
oh, sorry.
I beg your pardon, but Chief, what you couldn't say there, or what you wouldn't say there, was that you accept that there is federal government oversight over a Mi'kmaw fishery here, over a moderate livelihood fishery, and whether you develop a plan and you put it to them and they reject it, do you accept that someone has the right, other than the Mi'kmaw, to regulate your fishery?
I'd like to defer to Bruce for that, or legal.
Sure, Paul. I think you know what the answer is. The answer is that the minister has ultimate authority under the constitutional structure. The problem is that the minister has to justify whatever limitations. To sort of, the two propositions are here. Every limitation on the exercise of the Mi'kmaw right is something that the federal government can impose. However, they can only impose it if it's justified. And we just a few minutes ago went over the Badger test as to how you justify it. So ultimately, under the constitutional structure, the courts have said the minister's regulatory power prevails if it is justified under the Badger test. And the point that I was making earlier is she references the Marshall decision and the regulatory power and justification for conservation, but she doesn't tell the world, you folks, that that justification has to meet the criteria in Badger. So it's a quote, but it's a bit of a selective quote out of the context of how you justify.
Thanks for answering the questions.
Thank you. We will now go to Drake Lauthers from The Reporter.
I guess my question is for Chief Toney as well. I guess for the Assembly's reaction, what is your biggest concern with DFO's decision yesterday, or I guess the announcement?
Just seeing if I'm on mute here. Well, quite frankly, we were shocked. Our nation is shocked by what the minister has said. For them to make a unilateral decision without consultation was extremely shocking. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
And with the, I guess, the lack of seasonality talk, what's, I guess, your next move? I know Chief Sack mentioned yesterday that they're going to continue to stick with their out of season fishery. So is that something that you guys will be looking at too, or will you, I guess what's the next steps here now?
Well, this is a complicated issue that we're all struggling with, how we're rolling out our plans. Each community has its own autonomy, dealing with adjacency. And so, with Annapolis Valley, I'm yet to consult a full fish plan to my people, and it'll be up to my people to decide how we move forward. And our people know we have a right to fish. And with taking the overall guiding principles that come from our nation as a collective right to fish, we'll be moving forward. So Annapolis Valley is almost finished its plan to present to the community for ratification. And then and only then will I, go forward with any plan. But the 13 chiefs, we're all coming together. This is uniting the 13 chiefs of Nova Scotia, and we will be having more dialogue to discuss how we're moving forward. But Annapolis Valley, and I only speak for Annapolis Valley, we're going to be moving forward to implement our plan, and that'll be decided by the people. And I'm just going to deliver the message. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now go to Nick Maloney from CBC.
Thank you. Thanks, Chiefs. The federal government has blamed a lack of progress here on the complexity of designing multiple regulation strategies that suit individual communities. This might be a question for Chief Toney, maybe for Chief Sid. Does the Assembly believe that the rights need to be implemented on a community-to-community basis? We talk about collective rights. Does that mean that the treaty rights themselves also apply to any individual Mi'kmaw harvester?
I may answer that. Each community has its own autonomy. We're working to implement that. I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? My apologies.
Right. The blame would be the federal government has multiple times said that there hasn't been a great deal of progress given the complexity of designing unique regulation strategies particular to each individual community. I'm just wondering if there is something that the Mi'kmaw, the Assembly, that all chiefs agree on, that they all want, and perhaps one of those might be that the treaty rights themselves, constitutionally protected, are relate to an individual Mi'kmaw harvester, or do they have to be applied on a community-wide basis?
The 13 chiefs are dedicated to work as a nation. This right is a collective right, and for the individual to for the individual Mi'kmaw to fish. We are working through that with the guiding principles from our nation. So each community's plans fit within the guiding principles. So due to different territories within Mi'kmawgi, we are, there's going to be differences, different species, different ways to fish, and we have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of where we are going to fish, dealing with adjacency issues. And so, yeah, we're committed to working with each other on this. So I hope that answers your question.
My follow-up, if I can, Crystal, would be for Mr. Wildsmith. If we go back to the Badger test and we talk about implementing 3 of those elements that you've mentioned numerous times are important: the legislative objective, the as little as possible infringement on rights, and the consultation issue. In legal terms, can the government move forward without implementing all 3 of those things at once? That seems to be what we're encountering right now, that without consultation, there still are perhaps infringements of rights, even when justified strictly by the issue of consultation.
Your question, Nick, seems a little bit unclear to me. I think the way I would answer it, tell me if it's adequate, is if there is a limitation that the federal government wants to impose, then they have to consult, they have to justify on that grounds like conservation. They have to engage in minimal infringement of that right. And if at the end of the day there is some infringement, then they need to accommodate. So none of those elements have happened in respect of the commercial seasons, except they say that it is justified on the grounds of conservation, but the evidence has not been provided.
Thank you, Nick. The next questions come from Maureen Gugu at Google Us News, and she has sent them in actually to me directly, so I'm just going to ask her questions. Question number 1 is, what does the Assembly plan to do to address the lack of consultation on part of DFO, for example, court actions? Bruce, can we put that to you?
Yes, I'm just needing to plug in my my iPad here so you don't lose me completely. So just 1 second.
Sure. While Bruce is doing that, is there anything that either the chiefs want to say to that? So the question again is, what does the Assembly plan to do to address the lack of consultation on part of DFO, for example, court action?
Chief Sid here, then I can pass it over to Bruce. I think one of the things that we should really understand in regards to this whole process, this process hasn't happened overnight in regards to consultation. It's been in the works for 20-some years. As we know, the case is 21 years old. But having said that, again, it's the federal government and ourselves have been at the table to talk about this. But still, it's unfortunate that the lack of consultation has taken place. And it's really unfortunate that where the minister had just come up with this announcement without any really truly consultation with us. And that's the frustrating part. I mean, in regards to all the plans and stuff in which the communities have been working on, they've been working on this for over 2 years now. People asked, well, what is the principles? Well, there was 15 different principles in which the communities agreed upon. And of course, one was, of course, not jeopardizing our rights in any of this. The other thing was to fish under the nautical limit in regards to, conservation and the species itself, and taking into consideration of sciences, and also they were talking about the seasonality part of it. But again, it is the frustration of the federal government coming back and sitting down and really talking with us. But it's just unfortunate that, again, it's another example of what they've put forward without meeting with us. Whether we move to the court action or whatever it might be on next steps, we are frustrated, and all 13 communities are very disappointed with what has taken place. After how many years have we talked about this? How many years have we been talking to our communities to put their plans together within the guiding principles of which we said we would follow as communities? But having said that, I'll pass it on to Bruce. Go ahead, Bruce.
Thanks, Chief Sid. The short answer is no definitive course of action has been adopted by the chiefs. So court action has not been ruled out. The one course of action that seems to be universally talked about by the chiefs is that they will develop a plan and they will proceed to fish in accordance with their plan. The minister has said if there's no license from her to do whatever it is the plan says, then it will be subject to enforcement action. And DFO has always said that the conservation and protection officers are not controlled by the minister or her staff or her people. They're a power unto themselves, and their job is to enforce the Fisheries Act. So you can expect some kind of confrontation on the water when those two things collide. Having said that, as previously noted, there is a session on Friday to deal with seasonality, a consultation on that issue, asking for the science, asking for the evidence. It has not been provided yet. If one went to court on the basis of the lack of consultation, one of the likely remedies is, well, go back and consult. Don't implement something until it has been the subject of consultation. So having said that, in my view, it's still open to come back to the minister and her people and say, well, consult now and justify why that has to be the case. So I'm anticipating that that will be the first step down that process.
Thank you. And Maureen's follow-up question is, there are currently 8 court cases in Nova Scotia where Mi'kmaw fishers have been charged with fishing out of season without a license. They are pleading not guilty and using moderate livelihood as their defense. Does the Assembly plan to intervene in those court cases to seek more clarification on the moderate livelihood fishery?
I don't know, I suppose you were asking me that question since it's the follow-up. And there is no definitive answer to that. The normal process for someone who is charged is to go to their chief and counsel and say, I have this problem. Do you support my case? And then that chief and counsel would bring it to a wider body if they wish. That is to the Assembly of Nova Scotia Chiefs, if it's one of the communities that works through that assembly, and they would decide whether to support or not support. So far, I can say that I'm not aware that any community has come forward to the assembly by the chief and said, we think this person should be supported.
Thank you, Bruce. The next person we have on the list is Maude Montembolt, and I apologize if I didn't say your name correctly, from CBC Radio Canada. Oh, Maude, we cannot hear you. It says you are unmuted. If you want to take a second just to figure that out, we can go to Angel Moore at APTN and we'll come back. Oh, you're working now. Great.
Okay, hi. Anyone speaking French by any chance? No, nobody. Would you mind, Mr. Wildsmith, to turn your screen so that would be better for the TV?
I don't like being on TV.
Yeah, well,
No, actually, that's an issue that had come up, and I'm going to tell you my incompetence. I put this iPad into a lock mode, and I don't know how to get it out. So
Okay.
it won't automatically flip as you're requesting.
oh,
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Well, I had only one question, and it has already been partly answered, but would you be willing to take legal measures and battle until the Supreme Court, so Marshall changes?
That sounds like a Chiefs question.
Good, because the screen is on the good side.
Chief Sid, as co-chair, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I'll do the best I can. Yeah, again, I think it's one of these things that we need to take a look at. Can we answer that today? No, we can't answer that today. But again, it's something that we would have to take back to the assembly, to the chiefs, to discuss on what actions might take place in the future. We don't know that yet. But until then, and right now, we're trying to deal with the situation that has come forward to us, and we'll be taking that and discussing it with the assembly. And that's kind of where we take our directions from the chiefs of the assembly on what action we're going to take next. And of course, each community has legal counsel, as well as we have legal counsel at KMK&O, and we'll have those discussions on where we go. Thanks.
I'm new in the area, so but from what I understand, this conflict has been going on and on and on. So isn't time to stop it? And would legal measures be the only way to stop what's been happening since over and over?
You're correct. I mean, a lot of us are very frustrated. I know that Bruce has been on the file for many years. I know that our lead negotiator, Viola Robinson's been around for many years as well, and the frustration. We do have a process here, made Nova Scotia process, where we felt that, you know, even from the Marshall way back when, come together and form something where we would talk and discuss this. However, if it doesn't work, does it have to be relooked at as far as that particular process? Probably yes. But again, it is frustrating to think that we've agreed that we are going to work nation to nation, and it's not working. So again, what is our next steps? And that is something that we would be taking back, you know, to the chiefs on our next steps. So right now, I can't really predict what that next step will be at this point. Thanks.
Because you must be tired of only talking and nothing is happening.
Yeah, you're correct. There's a lot. You're correct. There's a lot of frustration at the chiefs level. Even today, you know, we had all 13 chiefs. We were talking, and we are really, you know, we're frustrated. Like you said, we're almost tired of talking. Of what are we going to do? What's our next actions? And believe me, I know that in our communities, the same questions is coming forward. Is, well, what are you guys doing? How come they continue to do this? You know, one thing I must say, the Mi'kmaw people have been and are very patient people. But it gets to the point where our patience are truly wearing out. And I think that that's something that we need to consider as leaders to move to our next step. So.
Thank you, Chief
Nice
Sid.
meeting you. Thank you.
We will now go to Angel Moore from APTN. Angel, are you there? I don't know if she's there. I don't know if she's still connected. We'll take the silence as no. So I thank everyone for their time. Oh, she just said she's here. She sent me a text, but apparently she can't get, oh, she's going to text me her question. just take a moment to receive the text. And while we're waiting for her text to come in, I will let all the journalists know that this session is recorded. I know some of you are recording it independently, but I will send out the link to the recording to everyone so that they can access any of the video files that you need. Immediately following, I think it takes a few minutes for Zoom to download the files, and then I will send the link out to everybody. So Angel is still texting. And this is going to be a question for Chief Toney, she says. I'm wondering if it's easier if I just call her. We'll see if we can call her.
I am so sorry. Can you hear me?
We can. I can hear you. Can the Chiefs hear you?
I don't know.
Oh, we're getting feedback. I'm sorry, Angel. So I will listen to your question and I will translate it.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening. So, Chiefs are talking about unity and with this, and the new proposal by the DFO is regulating the elevation regions, the seasons, and last fall, the Chiefs from Bear River and Acadia First Nation put out comments that Spaghetti was actually fishing in their region, and they did not appreciate that. So today, is there more unity? Because last fall, it seemed like there was.
Okay, I will try to condense that question a little bit because I don't know if I can do the full question justice. But Angel's question is about adjacency, and she understands that there was some comments made last fall about Sabaganagati and fishing in the area they're fishing in, and if the feelings are still the same going into the spring season. Does that accurately reflect your question, Angel?
Unity, because Bear River and Acadia put out statements that Spaghetti had no right to go into their region, and fishers I spoke to say it's all Mi'kmaw. So simply feel for everyone to fish wherever they want.
So she's asking about unity because of the statements from Acadia and Bear River last fall, and she's hearing from harvesters that it's all Mi'kmawgy and the Mi'kmaw should be able to fish wherever they want. And she is asking the position of the Assembly on that unity message and how they feel about people fishing in wherever, whatever waters. Are we good with that?
Yeah.
Perfect. So to one of the chiefs, Chief Jerry, I believe Angel had asked for you.
Okay, sorry, I was having issues with my screen here, but I'll try to answer that as best as I can. Yeah, the Nova Scotia Mi'kmaw Chiefs are unified in their message. We're trying to deal with adjacency issues. We're dealing with 7 different traditional territories of the Mi'kmaw, and some of the issues around coming into certain ports or territories is something that we need to speak amongst ourselves and how we deal with that. And I do know that a few chiefs in Gaswick territory, they had some strong views with how certain things were unfolding. But personally, my feeling, we need to, that's something that needs to be worked out with the leadership of the Chiefs of Nova Scotia. How are we going to deal with that? And I think we were somewhat splintered when this was thrusted upon us, dealing with adjacency issues, dealing with access issues, and it's something that we're looking to work towards. So I never came out with a statement. Annapolis Valley belongs in the Gaswick and Sabaganagati district. So it's things that we're working towards on how do we go into a different traditional territory from the communities that we live in a respectful manner. And that's what we're trying to work through right now. So I hope that answers your question. It's something that just needs to be worked out within the communities and how we're moving forward. How do the communities deal with those issues, along with the Grand Council, with the traditional way that we've managed over 10,000 years. So I hope that's it. I don't know if there's any follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. One more, my last question is, my follow-up question is,
She does have a follow-up question. She's just asking it right now.
the DFO, suddenly threw this plan out here, and it seems the same. It just seems so regardless of this plan, are communities going to launch their fishery without DFO moderate livelihood licenses? Are they just going to do it anyways?
So the question is, with DFO's announcement yesterday, do communities have intentions of continuing on with their moderate livelihood fishery, regardless of DFO's position? Does that accurately reflect that?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Chief Jerry?
It was the question, do we plan on continuing to fish?
Yes. Do the Mi'kmaw still continue to fish despite DFO's announcement yesterday and DFO's approach to how the Mi'kmaw should do their moderate livelihood fishery?
I can just speak for Annapolis Valley, but of course we're moving forward with our plan. We stay committed to try to consult with DFO, with Canada. We can't consult with ourselves, and that's what we've been asking for. So, we want to co-manage the fishery enforcement, everything holistically dealing with the fisheries. So, but it's up to our community it's up to the communities to deal with each autonomy of each. So I know when my plan that I'm going to present to my community members to hopefully ratify, if it gets ratified and when it finishes, we plan on going fishing. We're fishing now. So, but I would like to say we are looking to to co-manage this and work along with we're try to work with industry, try to work with the federal government in implementing our plan. So it's we want peace on the water. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Angel. So again, thank you all for your time today. We appreciate it. That's the end of the questions from media. For anyone who is looking for the file, like I said, I will send the video link to all those who were registered for today's Zoom press conference. So thank you, Chief Peters, Chief Toney, and Bruce Wildsmith. We appreciate your time. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.